So let's hope today I sound a little bit better and a little less tired. But today we're going to be going over the governor election in the state of California. Recently had their primary on June 8th, I believe. And eventually John Cox and Gavin Newsom, the current lieutenant governor on the Democratic side. This will actually take place between a Democrat and a Republican, compared to other political pundits supposedly turning towards a Democrat scenario. But essentially this one will be a Democratic versus Republican thing. Actually, if we take a look at the primary results, so John Cox is a Republican, Gavin Newsom the Democrat, going against each other. But if you look in the Senate race, two Democrats, so that's what a couple other political pundits were expecting. But clearly there was definitely a majority, well, not a majority, but a clear leader in the United States Senate. But for the governor's race, I can't say the same. And that's why we're going to do an analysis of it. I was originally going to do the Senate video, but it's not interesting. I mean, two Democrats, there's really nothing to contest. But in the governor election, people think this one could actually become competitive. So I'm going to talk about it. So starting off over just looking at the primary map, the Republicans did not do well. They had 1.74 million votes, the Democrats 2.85, and clearly the Democrats are always in the majority in California. A number of people are pointing to the fact that Gavin Newsom could have a couple scandals, but keep in mind Gavin Newsom beat a field of Democrats, and John Cox got 26.3% of the vote. That's not a victory. 26% of the vote or 33% is not a victory, and when it comes to the general election, we're probably going to see a Democratic victory. A lot of you have been thinking that California is going to turn around because of the constant rule from either liberal leaders or Democratic leaders, but that's not what's going to happen, especially in a year like this one. California is going to be one of the first states that wants to show a message of opposition to the president, even if they somewhat are starting to approve of him a little bit more, which they aren't. They probably still wouldn't give him a possibility of winning here, especially with the Republican coming out of California. Keep in mind, the last one to do that was Arnold Schwarzenegger, and keep in mind the Terminator was the governor of California, and that was mainly because he was an actor. I mean, keep in mind, there are no other Republicans who could truly win here unless they are known statewide, and John Cox wasn't known statewide. He was just the only person who got second place. He's second place. He's not first place. He's not ahead of anyone. He's not in the majority, and neither is Gavin Newsom. But Gavin Newsom has Democratic backing behind him. John Cox doesn't, and the fact that John Cox only got 26%, I was expecting the top two candidates to be around 35, somewhere equal, but he kind of underperformed where I thought he would, but he actually did pretty well, but he's still a Republican in California. If you look at some of the counties he won that are typically Democratic, let's go ahead and go look at the 2016. This is the 2016 presidential election results. There's a little bit more blue than what you see on the primary map, and that's mainly because of the Democratic vote splitting, not because the Republicans were winning over the majority of voters. Let's look at San Diego County. If you add, I'm not going to botch that name. I'm just going to call him Antonio. If you add his votes to Gavin Newsom's, the Democrats would have won that county. It's just the fact that there was one prominent Republican in that county, but he only won because he was a prominent Republican. He's not known statewide, but he was that one person who they faintly heard about on the news. But he's not like Gavin Newsom, lieutenant governor, known amongst the state legislature. It's not the same type of thing. And John Cox isn't necessarily the best at campaigning either. And when looking at the candidates, Gavin Newsom clearly is the most appealing to the values of people in California. It's stereotyped as liberal stronghold, Democratic stronghold, and that's what it's going to be in 2018. There's not going to be some major workaround, major turnaround of the state going a 180 and going to the Republican side, because that's not how things work, especially in a Democratic wave year. That's almost as like saying a Republican would win in New York or a Democrat could win in Wyoming just having no name recognition. Yes, I would understand it if it was a celebrity or someone who was a former governor, but it's not the same thing. And just because they had a little bit of a showing in a primary competition, barely getting a fourth of the vote, doesn't mean anything. And yes, I understand you can make the same argument for Gavin Newsom, but he gets a pass. He's a Democrat. Keep that in mind. California is predominantly ran by Democrats, and that's not going to change for a long time just based off how demographics are going. And you can't say that just because John Cox was able to get on that ballot means he's going to win. I saw a couple of you in my live stream saying John Cox is going to win the general election. Come back to me then, and it'll just show that you're wrong because of the fact that this is a Democratic state. We're not going to expect a Republican victory. And in Maryland, Massachusetts in 2014, I didn't expect a Democratic victory. Let me delete this comment. Sorry, my voice. I did not expect a Republican victory. My bad. But also, keep in mind, those states were under the Obama administration. We are under the Trump administration, and one of the most Democratic states in the union. And just looking at that 2016 map, it got even more Democratic. And that was in a Trump wave year, meaning the state itself is turning more Democratic. Can you imagine if this was a Clinton wave year? She could have won around 70% of the vote at most, and that would have been, amazing for her part, and that would have just killed off the Trump campaign. But she won and pushed it more Democratic in a Trump wave year, meaning she could have done a lot more damage in this state to Republicans in general if she had won the election. And yes, there would be possibility for a Republican victory if she was president, because she would likely have red opposition across the United States, but that's not what we're seeing. We're not seeing a Republican in power who's going to win more seats. Democrats are going to win more seats, and they're going to pick up seats from the Republicans regardless. And I'm not saying it's going to be some huge wave where there will be like 85 seats turned over in the House, but what I'm saying is it's very likely that Democrats gain seats, and it's really not going to be Democrats losing, because that's not how midterms roll, regardless of the approval of the president. So let's look at California. The last time they had a governor election, this was in 2014. So Governor Jerry Brown won with 59.4% of the vote to 40.6%. This was a Republican wave year. Barack Obama was president. The Republicans had a ground game in a number of these counties. Jerry Brown won with around 60% of the vote. And looking at this county right here, Fresno County, the Republican won here with 53.2%. The Democrat, Jerry Brown, of course, 46.8%. Look at this same county in 2016, pushed more Democratic in a Republican wave year, okay? Looking at this ballot in a Republican wave year, yes, I understand why some of these counties went red. But then we go to 2016, a presidential election, got pushed more Democratic even, and again, a Republican presidential wave year. So when Trump was able to flip the Rust Belt, he was able to bring Nevada closer, bring Minnesota closer, win Florida, win Ohio, win Iowa, push New Hampshire closer, push Maine closer. He didn't do that across the West Coast. I mean, he did it in some states like Oregon. Actually, Washington, I believe, got a little bit more Democratic, but Oregon stayed as it was, stayed around the same as it was in 2012, and he wasn't able to have the same type of effect on the California voters in 2016. Yes, he did handedly win the primary, but if you look at the election results, he got 4.4 million votes. In the primary, he got 1.6 million. So yes, of course he gained voters. I mean, it's the primary election, but his primary turnout and his primary performance does not correlate with what we saw in the presidential election for a number of reasons. And what we're seeing in the primary in 2018 for the governor election here is not what we're going to see in the general election. So let's take a look at the primary results for the Democratic side, even though they're both combined primaries, in 2016. So if you look at some of the areas where Hillary Clinton did pretty well, you can't say the same thing happened for Gavin Newsom. He didn't do well in those Clinton counties, and that's also good for him. Keep in mind these Clinton counties were predominantly Democratic counties, and if you look at the counties that Gavin Newsom won, yes, they were predominantly Democratic, but if he's able to win in areas that were previously progressive counties, and then John Cox wins in the areas that were Clinton counties in the primary, and then you take a look at the 2016 results, you can expect those to go blue as well. Obviously, not all of them are going blue, but over in this section where we actually had another Democrat in the majority and Gavin Newsom only got 11.8% of the vote, down here, just look at this area, go to 2016, same area. Look at the 2016 primary. 2014 results, yes, red because it was a Republican wave year, but looking at the Democratic primary, Clinton area. So if Gavin Newsom, first of all, he's closely more to Hillary Clinton than Bernie Sanders. If he's able to win here, if he loses there, and keep in mind that the Republican won here, he's probably going to win here in the general election, just based off previous elections and how the state has gone and the approval rating of the president in this state. 67% of California voters disapprove of the president. That's not going to go well with the Republican Party, okay? Yes, John Cox did not win the number of people that approve of him, so if he gets 31%, good for him. But Trump is not going to do well for the Republicans here. It's just how things are. And especially since California is going to be right in the talk about the mainstream media and in terms of house flipping, that one's going to be focused on a lot. And John Cox is probably going to end up with a devastating defeat. I really see a Gavin Newsom victory over 10%. I probably don't see it getting that close. And looking at this polling data, the one poll that shows it close is one done by the Republican campaign in the favor of John Cox. And then you take one that's actually a nonpartisan, 42% for Gavin Newsom, 32% for John Cox. Clearly, people haven't made their decisions yet, but if you're only 8.1% away from winning, and this race is rated as solid Democratic, don't expect a Republican victory. And just looking at the open primary results of the polling, Gavin Newsom was expected to carry 30.8%. He carried 33.3%. So he overperformed polls. But so does John Cox. So he overperformed around 9%, meaning it is possible for him to catch up, but it's not going to be enough to overcome him, even if he does overturn and overperform the election results, and there is a possibility that he only needs 8.1% of the undecided vote to go to him, and a number of the undecided voters are Democratic voters who really don't want to support Gavin Newsom, but when it comes down to being forced to vote for two candidates, they would do it. And then overall, in general, this state is a Democratic state, so you can't expect much. I'm going to go through it right now and finish off this video. So final takeaways: Gavin Newsom is going to win this election. He's probably going to carry it pretty easily, just based off a number of factors that you can see throughout the video. So thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below. Comment down the next state you want me to do like this, and I'll see you all tomorrow.